Hey, welcome to Taste for Adventure. Today we are talking about BJCP Category 6A, Marzens.
So I knew we were going to do Marzens, but it's 6A. What is Category 6?
It's a good question. So BJCP Category 6 is amber, malty, European lagers. And there are three subcategories within that. So 6A is the Marzen, which we'll be discussing quite a bit about today. And then 6B is Rauchbier, or smoked beer. So it's a German beer where they smoke some of the malts to give it definitely like that amber, like malty flavor. And then a Dunkelsbach, which is kind of the baby brother of the bigger and more popular Doppelbock.
Interesting. Okay, great. So we got three beers to taste, like we usually do. Got Paulaner, Sam Adams, and Left Hand. They all have Marzens.
That's right, yeah. So continuing on with the theme that we're trying to go for of doing a traditional German import, a big U.S. craft that anybody at home should be able to taste along with, and then as well as a kind of small to moderate size U.S. craft. So hopefully you'll be able to secure these beers without too much trouble and maybe taste along at home.
I think so. So what is a Marzen? What makes a Marzen?
The BJCP guidelines overall impressions say Marzen is an elegant, malty German amber lager with a clean, rich, toasty and bready malt flavor, restrained bitterness, and a dry finish that encourages another drink. Overall malt impression is soft, elegant, and complex, with a rich aftertaste that is never cloying or heavy.
Okay.
And as we know, from a beer judge's perspective, you could have a wonderful beer in front of you, but if it doesn't align with the guidelines, that's where you kind of have to knock it. So that is how I will approach tasting the Marzens that we have in front of us.
All right. Sounds good to me. What are some of the ingredients that usually go into a Marzen?
So we'll touch a little bit more about this on another episode, but really the main ingredient is that it's going to be a German lager. So it's going to be brewed in the lager style with lager yeast, and then also have Munich malts. Munich malts are really showcased in a Marzen.
Yeah, great.
All right, so should we get into it?
Let's get into the tasting.
All right. A cool thing about the guidelines is that they will give you several commercial examples of a beer that exemplify the style. And one of those beers for Marzen is the Paulaner Oktoberfest, which we're going to start our flight off with today.
Yeah, then we should have a pretty good baseline for what a Marzen should be.
That's right.
All right.
This should really be setting the tone for a pinnacle of what a Marzen should be.
Sure. It's got a great nose on it.
Yeah, and it's one of those where it has that malt depth, but it doesn't have a lot of the caramel or the sweetness that some of the U.S. interpretations of a Marzen might have.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of malt on the nose. It's got a really nice orangey color to it. Decently clear, but a little cloudy.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
It's kind of fogging up the glass a little bit, but if you wipe the condensation, it is pretty clear.
Sure.
Yeah, just really nice, like toasted bread crust, and like freshly baked bread.
Right.
I get a little bit of low spicy hops, and just a really clean, inviting aroma.
Yeah, it's very you can smell how clean it is. Really, very crisp smelling. So we'll give it a taste here and see if the taste matches the smell.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say that's pretty much a 1-to-1. It in terms of it tastes about what you'd expect purely from the aroma.
Yeah, it's really, I think the term liquid bread has been used to like describe beer, the origins of beer, and this really tastes like liquid bread. I mean, it's just a mouthful of fresh baked bread, crispy bread crust, that really nice like toasty. It's really nice.
Really nice, really nice, really crisp, really clean. Yeah, really bready with not a lot of. There's not really much hop bitterness to speak of.
No, but I think that crispness is it's a combination of the superb attenuation. Like there's no residual sweetness, so it doesn't need a whole lot of hops to balance it because there's not a lot of sugars left in there to have to pull it into balance.
Sure.
So this is a beer that really doesn't need to be very highly hopped. You can hop it at 20 IBUs and be in style, and you're still going to have a nice, crisp, dry finish.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what the best examples of the style does. They're very, very malty without being heavy, and they finish remarkably dry. So, mouthfeel-wise, I think it's really, really superb, and what right do a couple of Americans have to critique a German brewery that's been around for centuries, right? But I think that's the only spot that I'd really knock it is that it is just a little sharp on the end.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I did ding it a point for that. I think as we taste through some other German examples, they might still finish crisp, but not quite at it might not quite have as much of an edge to the finish as this one does.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested to see how this one will stack up against our other beers today than other classic maybe examples of the style. Because although you might ding it at that point for the sharpness, this is still a superb beer.
Yeah.
I mean, something you'd expect from commercial examples of the style.
Yeah, I think it's one of the oldest, extremely consistent styles. That's still a very good classic style.
Yeah.
So I even felt bad dinging it at one point. That's the only place I even found a place to take a point. So overall, I actually scored this beer a 49 out of 50.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean it is a world-class beer.
Yeah. This is really good. I'm glad you picked this one up. Really clean and crisp finish. It's like you said, it's very bready. There's no it's not wild like some of the other beers that we've tasted on this channel, where it's got really neutral base beer and then explosive crazy flavors. So I really like it. I really if all the other examples of Marzens are going to be as good as this, I'm excited for the rest of the series on this particular topic.
All right, so we've set the bar extremely high with Paulaner Oktoberfest Marzen, and we're going to move on to Left Hand's Oktoberfest Marzen next and see an American example.
Yeah, so this one's the Oktoberfest by Left Hand. So that's more of a Midwest brewery.
Yeah, I think they might be out of Colorado.
This is the first time I've had their Oktoberfest.
This might be my first time as well. So, aroma-wise, I'm getting a lot of those other aromas, but just not to that same intensity.
Yeah, this one is a lot more subdued by comparison.
Right. It's almost like, instead of fresh baked bread, I'm almost getting like a hot pretzel sort of aroma, where it's there, but maybe not as intense as when you crack that loaf of fresh baked bread out of the oven, you get that steam. That's the Paulaner. I think the Left Hand is, it still has a nice aroma, but it's not as intense. Right. if it's something like a pretzel.
Yeah, similar color and clarity. So that looks like it's within, if we're talking strictly BJCP guidelines, it looks like it's in style pretty much.
I think this is a bit hazier than it should be. And I wiped the condensation from the glass, and it's still So I did knock it a point for that.
Sure.
The color is fantastic.
Yeah,
though. I mean,
spot on, really.
Again, just quintessential fall beer color.
Head is sticking around a little bit more consistently, I think.
Yep. So flavor-wise, take us through what you're getting there.
This one I feel like might be a little bit maybe more malt forward, I think. What am I tasting here? There's something there that I'm getting.
I think that it's definitely still very much malt forward, which is appropriate to style, but it's lacking some of that complexity and depth of the German one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting some caramel sweetness and some caramel flavor. So I think that they probably use some adjuncts, some specialty malts there for it.
Yeah, let's see. Rocky Mountain water. So the water, I know we've talked about in other episodes, will play a big deal into it. It's brewed on the banks of the mighty St. Vrain. Okay. So you think the water could maybe have something to do with that a little bit? Maybe a little bit more? Or do you think, it's going to purely be...
It's really hard to speculate unless the beer is super minerally or super clean. I think the water, I'm not getting anything really too far out there as far as the water profile goes. Did you say they listed the ingredients here on the can?
Not really.
Not.
I mean, they kind of have.
Malt flavors, malted barley, hops, and yeast. So, it's really hard to speculate on a recipe if they don't really list the ingredients.
Right.
But I just get the impression that there are some specialty malts in there beyond just like a Munich malt.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're getting. So you approximate the malt flavors and profile of the import version, but I just think it lacks some of that depth.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, and they're probably, I'm like you said, it's hard to speculate, but they're probably using pure Munich malts in the Paulaner. And just from what I know about Left Hand, this tastes, I don't want to say the same, but it's got a similar sort of taste to other Left Hand beers. So sure. I'm wondering if they maybe have a central malt that they like to use.
And that can be a big part of it, and then the water is a big thing too, and they could also have a house lager yeast that a lot of breweries will have house yeast strains, and they use that yeast strain, whether it's an ale or a lot of breweries will have like an ale yeast strain, a lager yeast strain, and then like a specialty yeast strain, or like kind of go off the beaten path for specialty beers.
That's really interesting.
So it very well could be just their house lager strain instead of like a German Oktoberfest lager. Actually, I really enjoy this beer. I think it's pretty well done.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, I would never want to follow a homebrew in a competition right after an imported German one, because it's really hard to find any faults with the Left Hand on its own, but coming right after the classic example, we're kind of picking it apart a little bit.
Yeah, and that's, we've talked about flight order on other episodes, and this I feel like is a really good example of the style, but it's going up. It's a tough act to go up against the Paulaner starting us off.
Yeah,
I would definitely have more than one. I think the way that I've described it in the past is circling back.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I would order one and then immediately again. I would probably come back to this one after I had tasted all the ones that I had been wanting to have for the night, which doesn't really equate to any kind of a number score. I think if I had to equate it to a number score, it's maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah.
A 1 being like, I don't know if I can finish this one, and a 10 being,
that's all I want to drink forever.
I'm probably going to drink this beer again immediately after finishing this one.
Okay.
So this is probably a 5. This is a good one. I think this is a good example. It's kind of hard to go up against the Paulaner like that.
Yeah, yeah. But that being said, I still think that Left Hand did a very nice job with their Oktoberfest. And, I would have this at an American beer festival.
Oh, yeah.
I've been to some, fall beer festivals and things like that. And I think this would fit in really well. What I like about it, though, is that they didn't get too crazy and wild with it.
No.
It's not a pumpkin spice Oktoberfest. It's not like heavy-handed with the caramel, or they're not trying to be too wild with it. So it's a really nice beer, especially like if you're going to be at somewhere like a beer fest or a tasting.
Yep.
It's a nice, almost palate cleanser type beer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could definitely drink this in between two off-the-wall beers and I think come out on the other side pretty well.
Yeah, and this would be, extremely refreshing and kind of fit in with that lineup, but then also be really a breath of fresh air in a setting like that.
Absolutely.
Well, good. So finally, we have a beer that I think most people probably have tried.
Probably.
It's Sam Adams Oktoberfest, and that is actually probably the beer that got me to fall in love with craft beer.
Really?
I thought, way back in like early 2000s that craft beer was Killian's and Blue Moon and Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
Before I learned about the real world of imports and real craft beer and things. So Sam Adams Oktoberfest always has a special place in my heart. It was for a long time my favorite beer, and I couldn't wait.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, couldn't wait for August, September to roll around so I could get like cases and cases of Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
I don't know if I've ever had it before.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Just based on the beers that I gravitate towards.
Yeah.
Just kind of is when I'm at the bar, it's like, oh yeah, give me it's cold out, give me the stout, give me the porter,
Sure.
give me the dark, high ABV beer.
Well, I'll have this for maybe the 1,000th time, and you'll have it for the
so
first.
We'll see what that's like.
I think when Sam Adams Oktoberfest hits the shelves, you kind of know that fall is here. Football's going to be on TV. The leaves are going to start changing colors.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's here.
Mm-hmm. Now I've never had it before, as far as I can remember, but I can remember those commercials. This is a heavily advertised beer. This is what you would call maybe big American craft. But this is an extraordinarily clear beer, especially compared to the other two that we had.
Yeah, even compared to the German import, this is fantastically clear.
Yeah. So that is a little bit wild. I mean, it's still got that orangey autumn color. This is very kind of like a darker orange.
Yep.
So the dark leaves is what I'm getting.
Yep, this is like an amber copper type of color.
Yeah.
I mean, but really, really nice looking beer.
That bready kind of malt kind of nose.
I'm getting some breadiness, not as much as like the toast or the bread crust.
Right.
I'm getting some caramel and a little nuttiness in this one. Like maybe even a hint of toffee. There's definitely sweetness in there that I wasn't getting on the other two so much.
I would absolutely say, I mean, I can't perceive that as well as you are. Or perhaps I am perceiving it and just, I mean, obviously you've got the better articulation than I do. But I can, there's differences in all of these beers. None of them are quite the same, it's just so fascinating that these are all Marzens.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can talk about the IBU levels. We can talk about how they all have varying degrees of ABV. But in the end, they're all the same style. They're this Marzen kind of Oktoberfest deal. And, I mean, the differences are just wild to me between all of them.
And even in a pretty narrowly defined style. You think of a beer like, even like an IPA, that can be wildly different, and that's within the guidelines. But Marzen is a tightly defined category.
Well, not only that, but it's a subcategory too, which I think narrows it down even further, right?
You're absolutely correct. So IPAs is kind of a category. Then there are many like subsections of IPAs. But even if we just say like regular old classic American IPA, which is a subcategory of IPA, I suppose, is going to have a lot wider range. A lot of styles in BJCP have wider allowable ranges than a Marzen.
Sure.
But yeah, this is interesting. I'm getting some sweetness, some like toffee, butterscotchy type notes. Not necessarily unwelcome in kind of a beer as a fall beer, but in the Marzen category, I think it's a lot of place.
A little bit. It's definitely present where it was not present in the other two beers we tried.
Yeah, so I think of the three, I probably like the Sam Adams the least.
Interesting.
But it's still not bad.
No, it's not a bad beer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you could definitely, and people do, I mean, order these by, the multitude in bars and fests and whatnot. Now, I think the real question is, does this taste how you feel like it should taste? Does it taste like nostalgia to you?
I think it's been so long since I've, been kind of in that mindset, well before I was really into craft beer or, certainly beer judging, that, I'm not tasting it and being like, oh yeah, that's how Grandma used to make it, or anything like that.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm not super, I guess, nostalgic for it. I think it's more like the memories, and it was like the launching pad that helped me get into craft. So I appreciate it for that aspect of it.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Gotcha. Now, have you scored this beer before? Have you ever thought about what you might score this at, or what's your kind of quick and dirty approximation?
I think today, given what was in my glass, I think with some of the sweetness, the less crisp finish, maybe a little bit diacetyl, I'd probably score it like still probably low 30s.
Yeah.
Just not a bad score. I mean, I'm really nitpicking this beer, probably again because we started with the Paulaner, the pristine example.
You start with the best.
Yeah. So I would still probably score it, probably, I don't know, 32 to 35 range, something like that.
That's not terrible at all.
Yeah. Now, how about you? What about your metric and your score?
I would definitely, I would think about getting another one. So I think this is probably more of like a 3 for me. Especially compared to what we have had tonight. Definitely more of the I like it, and if I don't like the other beers that I try, I'll get another one, but I don't know. I don't think I would make it a point to try and circle back to this one.
Okay.
Me.
All right.
But
fair enough. Yeah. Try a Sam Adams Oktoberfest if it's just that and the macro lagers on tap, but otherwise maybe gravitate towards something a little bit more interesting, right?
Yeah. No, it's a good beer, good example, I think, of Marzen style.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Very good. Well, any final thoughts for the episode?
We've talked so much about Oktoberfest and Marzen style of beers. I know there's so much to go into that this can't possibly be the only episode that we're going to talk about Marzen styles of beer. So we've got a whole playlist about that.
We sure do. Yeah, we'll be covering Oktoberfest, both Marzens and Fest beers, in our Oktoberfest series. So stay tuned for more, and come back.
Cheers.